They didn't ban the dollar. They simply stopped using it. On July 9th, without warning, Donald Trump slammed Brazil with a 50% tariff, America's harshest economic penalty on any country this year. The justification? Not trade deficits, not national security, but Brazil's prosecution of former President Jair Bolsonaro. Within 72 hours, a second blow landed. The United States revoked visas for most of Brazil's Supreme Court judges. Not militants, judges. Their offense: overseeing Bolsonaro's coup trial. And then, almost buried beneath it all, a third strike. A Section 301 trade investigation, opening the door for sweeping sanctions on Brazil's financial systems. But here's what wasn't sanctioned. BRICS, Brazil's homegrown, dollar-free, state-run payment system. Fast, free. Already processing $450 billion per month, entirely outside the dollar ecosystem. And that, not Bolsonaro, is what Washington is really afraid of. Because BRICS doesn't just move money. It bypasses the dollar. Launched in late 2020, BRICS now reaches over 76% of Brazil's population. It processes more transactions than debit and credit cards combined, according to Brazil's central bank. Unlike Visa or MasterCard, BRICS isn't tethered to United States banks or SWIFT. It doesn't need dollars to clear cross-border payments, and it doesn't charge a cent. The US dollar plays no role in it. That's the crisis. At first, Washington viewed BRICS as an internal Brazilian innovation. Convenient, maybe disruptive, but not geopolitical. Then it quietly became interoperable with BRICS Pay, a multilateral system being trialed by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Suddenly it wasn't just domestic. It was global. BRICS is already routing transactions that would have flowed through SWIFT. And because it's government-run, Washington can't cut it off. Unlike traditional banks, BRICS doesn't answer to correspondent banking networks or dollar-clearing hubs. It clears directly between citizens and institutions, instantly. In effect, BRICS allows Brazil to operate a domestic monetary system that doubles as an international settlement platform, with no dependency on United States financial infrastructure. For Washington, this is more than technical, it's existential, because the United States doesn't just use the dollar as currency, it uses it as leverage. Leverage to sanction, to isolate, to reward and punish. That leverage depends on global compliance. And Brazil, by proving a large economy can function outside that orbit, is offering a model other nations might follow. This isn't theory. This is execution. When President Lula publicly questioned the dollar supremacy, it sounded like rhetoric. Why should every country have to base its trade on the dollar, he asked in Shanghai this year. Why can't we trade in our own currencies? At the time, that quote felt aspirational. Now, it looks like policy. Because while Trump was escalating tariffs over Bolsonaro, Brazil's central bank announced a new phase of BRICS integration, cross-border transactions with Latin American neighbors. Settlement will occur in local currencies, directly, without converting through the dollar. Mexico, Argentina, and Colombia are in talks. This isn't de-dollarization by declaration. It's death by 1,000 exclusions. But here's the contradiction. The United States isn't punishing Brazil for abandoning the dollar. It's punishing Brazil for prosecuting Bolsonaro, and in doing so, pushing Brazil further from the dollar system it wants to preserve. Consider this. The United States has a trade surplus with Brazil, not a deficit. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, Brazil has consistently bought more from the United States than it sells, over $300 billion in cumulative surplus since 2010. That fact alone invalidates Trump's typical tariff rationale. So why target Brazil? Because of a trial. Because one judge, Alexandre de Moraes, oversaw social media bans and issued arrest warrants for Bolsonaro loyalists. Trump called it a disgrace and tied the 50% tariff directly to those actions in his July 9th executive order. The punishment was political, but the consequences are financial. Now here's where the irony spikes. BRICS is gaining speed precisely because Visa and MasterCard are losing trust. U.S. sanctions have made American financial firms unpredictable partners. According to Reuters, Brazilian banks saw a 38% rise in BRICS transactions in the 30 days following Trump's tariff announcement. Merchants and customers alike are fleeing systems that feel exposed. Not because they hate the dollar, because they can't rely on it. That's how hegemony erodes. Not through revolution, but by erosion. Let's pause, because this wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. BRICS wasn't built to topple the dollar. It was built to include the poor, street vendors in Sao Paulo, farmers in Bahia, gig workers in Recife. For them, BRICS replaced cash, not SWIFT. It created access, not disruption. It enabled payments without bank accounts, boosted tax compliance, and reduced fraud. That was its intention. But now it's something else. A digital tunnel. One that runs underneath the dollar-based highways of global finance. And Washington can't shut it down. Trump's retaliation has backfired on every front. By invoking Section 301 of the Trade Act, the USTR opened an investigation that lumps together wildly unrelated issues, electronic payment systems, social media censorship, ethanol tariffs, and deforestation. According to the Federal Register notice, the list is so broad it includes unfair retaliation against American tech firms and failure to comply with anti-corruption norms. But here's the contradiction. U.S. firms like Rumble and Truth Social are suing Brazil in Brazilian courts, while simultaneously lobbying the White House to punish Brazil for those same court rulings. The U.S. is sanctioning judges for decisions it's appealing through those very judges. That's not strategy. That's confusion. And the markets have noticed. After Trump's tariff order, Brazilian coffee exports fell 12% in 2 weeks, according to data from Secafé, Brazil's Coffee Exporters Council. But the real signal came from capital flows. Bloomberg reports that Brazilian sovereign bond purchases from Chinese institutions jumped 37% in July. Beijing is buying what Wall Street is questioning. Because in moments of uncertainty, capital doesn't seek loyalty. It seeks stability. And BRICS looks increasingly like a stable channel that U.S. politics can't touch. SWIFT, meanwhile, is losing its grip. Originally designed as a neutral message system, it now functions as a geopolitical weapon. It was used to sanction Iran, freeze Venezuelan oil payments, and block Russian bank access. But, each use case has taught others a lesson. If the U.S. can flip a switch, the world will build new wiring. Brazil is now laying that wiring. PIX, BRICS Pay, and local settlement platforms are accelerating across the global south. India and the UAE have signed a rupee dirham trade agreement. China and Saudi Arabia are discussing yuan oil payments. Russia now settles most of its Asia trade in rubles or yuan. And Brazil, it's connecting the pipes, not with noise, with infrastructure. The shift is catching legal fire in Washington. A group of U.S. state attorneys general, backed by importers, has sued the Trump administration for abusing executive authority. They argue that the 1977 law Trump cited, meant for emergencies, was never intended for punitive tariffs. Judges in the federal appeals court question whether the White House had the right to impose tariffs without congressional approval. The case could end up at the Supreme Court, but the longer it drags on, the more momentum BRICS gains. That's the contradiction. Even if the courts reverse the tariffs, the damage to dollar primacy may already be done. Brazil hasn't retaliated. Yet. But its foreign minister has met twice with U.S. officials in the past 30 days, including a heated call with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. According to NBC News, Brazil is weighing countermeasures, possibly in the form of digital trade restrictions or tax reforms favoring non-dollar transactions. And in the background, Lula has gone quiet. That's telling, because silence isn't neutrality, it's calculation. Every day that BRICS expands without U.S. interference is a day the world sees dollar-free commerce in action. Every month that goes by without Brazilian retaliation is a month. Washington proves it can't stop what it started. This isn't a Cold War redux. It's a software update. BRICS's real-time payment model borrows heavily from FedNow, a U.S. system introduced by the Federal Reserve in 2023, but delayed repeatedly due to lobbying from private banks. Meanwhile, Brazil accelerated. It adopted open APIs, rolled out QR-based interoperability, and made participation mandatory for major banks. In trying to preserve dollar dominance through coercion, Washington ignored what Lula quietly built through inclusion. It punished what it should have learned from. And now it's watching a dollar alternative succeed. Not with protest signs or press releases, but with speed, reach, and performance. De-dollarization isn't a campaign, it's a consequence. What began as a domestic banking upgrade has become a model for nations seeking sovereignty without confrontation. Brazil didn't withdraw from the dollar system. It made itself immune to its pressure. And in doing so, it didn't kill the dollar. It made it optional. We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. Check out another video that is now on your screen.